We're with Elizabeth Brown, President and CEO of the Community Foundation, as well as Karin Demarest, Vice President of Programs at the Community Foundation. Hello, welcome to the show.
Hi.
Very pleased to have you here.
Great to be here.
Before we were talking, I made a bunch of jokes about the arts czar position and Stalinist Russia, and then my producer lost it and cut me off. So I just put it back on top here, so they'll have to deal with it. But I wanted to ask you guys straight up, for those who don't know, what is the Community Foundation and how do we distinguish it from the Communist Foundation? Just kidding. No, what is the Community Foundation?
The Community Foundation Sonoma County is a coalition of Sonoma County families who have generously set aside some charitable funds to give to a variety of causes across the county and across all issue areas: environment, arts, health and human services. And we work closely with those families to make grants on their behalf to many organizations throughout the county.
See, I didn't realize it was families. So it's a consortium of like individual private donors,
Correct.
Essentially, who have interest in various programs, and you guys help facilitate the distribution of those monies and probably growing those monies.
Exactly.
I would imagine. Yeah.
Exactly.
So you're sort of like a brokerage for the good guys, right?
Yeah, we facilitate from where there are resources to where their community needs.
Yeah. What are the community needs?
Well, they range dramatically.
Yeah.
I mean, we believe that most of the core issues in our county come down to issues of equity and really inequity. When you look at affordable housing, education, all indicators of health, there's such a distinction between those who have resources and those who don't. So that's the lens.
Is that Sonoma County or is that America in the world? I mean, that's always been the problem.
Yeah, it's
right?
It's our country and our county, and it's growing.
Yeah. Do you think it's in higher relief now? As Sonoma County's become more affluent in some ways and less affluent in other ways.
I think it's in higher relief in our country too.
Right, fair enough,
but I do think especially around some issues of affordable housing and the inequity is growing greater. So the challenges are greater. Thankfully, philanthropy is growing as well.
You know, I would imagine, I had this perception that like in 2008, everything stopped and donations for across the board for nonprofits and other organizations kind of like froze because a lot of the wealthy donors or people who participated in that also had asset problems, right?
Yeah.
Are we over that hump? Has that changed or what has changed perhaps since the crash?
All the data points to that we are back and beyond the 2008 levels of giving. But you're right, there was a chill at that time for sure, and philanthropy suffered and our whole nonprofit sector suffered.
And then wasn't there like some controversies like with Bernie Madoff and people like that, like absconding monies and no, am I okay? All right. Not with you guys, I'm just in general. Yeah,
right,
I mean,
right. No, but people were a lot more cautious about their investments. I would say one bright spot, if you can call it that, with the Great Recession is that it was a time where no matter how wealthy you were touched directly by some of the issues that traditionally affect just those in poverty. So like foreclosures, that wasn't among the philanthropic and wealthy, that wasn't something that they'd probably personally been touched by or a friend. Right. And so I think there was some greater connection to humanity in that period as well.
I was going to say, yeah, it sort of like creates empathy. Yeah.
Right.
And so among the programs, Karin, how are you interfacing with the community through the foundation?
Well, we take very seriously both our grant-making role, so from the programs department, we have the great honor of stewarding the legacy gifts of donors that have entrusted us to steward their funds beyond their lifetime. And so
now, see that term, steward the funds, which is awesome, it's a great term, but it's a term of art for what you guys do. What does that mean?
Well, that means that, let's just take an example. If a donor says, I care about supporting foster youth, and so therefore I'm going to establish an endowment with the Community Foundation that in perpetuity we will be looking at the greatest need in terms of supporting foster youth. We will be engaged with those in the community that are impacting and supporting foster youth, and we will then make grants to them. That's great. That's what we mean by stewarding.
Yeah.
And I think to really oversimplify is that we work with donors while we're living, and then they entrust us through their estates to also carry that out after their death.
Legacy. It's legacy giving.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And then in terms of the specific programs, what are some of the special interests that this particular donor pool has in the community?
So it falls right now into 5 specific fields of interest.
Yeah.
Beth mentioned some of them. Health and human services, so that includes working with homelessness, with foster youth, and really basic human needs, supporting the basic human needs of our community.
So let's say I'm a wealthy would-be philanthropist, my mother has Alzheimer's, and I have a special interest in those kind of issues. Can I come to you and say, hey, this is what I'm really passionate about right now, and I want to make a dent in the community somehow with this bag of dough I got. You can help channel to specific needs or reflect specific interests on the part of the donor themselves? Is that?
Yes.
Okay. Would you rather not? Would you rather just have a pile of, like funds to work with, or will you curate the funds, to reflect the needs of the donor?
Well, I think, people are philanthropic because they're called by something. That's a great example you mentioned.
Yeah.
We often interact with people around their philanthropy related to something that was very special and positive. Giving back to your the school you went to is a good example.
That's
you were
right, yeah.
basically there for a 4-year site visit. So
Right.
you're not coming to us and say, hey, can you really tell me something about this school?
Me, but I'm just saying.
Yeah. But then often people are moved by something they see or something they experience. So
Right.
you come to us, your mother's suffering from Alzheimer's, and you want some advice about where that money can make a difference. There are different paths. You might want to support a home here that's caring directly.
Right.
You might want to support Alzheimer's research. We can find those organizations. Over time, though, and as you look through your life through a philanthropic lens, you might expand your philanthropic portfolio
Right.
and think, okay, Alzheimer's is part of it. I also feel really passionately about education or the environment.
Do you help introduce your donors to a broader spectrum of possibilities for themselves? I mean, is that something you actively encourage, to open that lens a bit, their aperture rather? Or
Definitely.
Yeah.
We back up with them and have really a value-based discussion about what do you care about? What are the issues as you walk through your life that have been meaningful to you? And what difference do you want to see in the world? And most of the time, that's interrelated between a variety of issues and not just one thing.
Right, of course, yeah. Wow, this is. I mean, it makes me want to give. Yeah. Here's all my money. But okay, so how does the process work? So let's say I've just retired. I'm a business person. I have some extra resources, and I feel I want to give back. What's the first call I make? What is? I don't think a lot of people know how to give, or
Yeah.
at what level they can give. You don't have to be mega rich. You can be anyone, right?
Exactly.
To contribute. Okay.
Well, one great thing about the Community Foundation is we sit down with you for those conversations. It's very consultative and personal, the work that we do. So we wouldn't just direct you to a website, but we'd have a conversation, myself and Karin and perhaps others from our team, and say, okay, what are you interested in? And we don't start with the organizations. The organizations are kind of the end result, but
Right.
start with what difference do you want to make? What causes do you care about? And explore some different options, and then come back to you with some recommendations of where you might give. And the vehicle we do that through is we invite you to set up a fund at the Community Foundation, which is kind of like a charitable checking account of
I love it.
sorts.
Okay, well, we'll come back to this in a
Great.
second. We're talking about the Community Foundation, and we'll be right back.
There's a shelter pet who wants to meet you. Meet one today. Visit theshelterpetproject.org. Adopt.
We're with Elizabeth Brown, President and CEO of the Community Foundation, and Karin Demarest, Vice President of Programs for the Community Foundation. We've been chatting about how one gives and how basically you can help people you can facilitate people having what you called a sort of philanthropical checking account or donor checking account of a sort, as a metaphor, obviously.
right.
How does that work?
Well, it works that and this usually appeals to people where they are already giving philanthropically and maybe writing a lot of checks a year.
Right.
And have a certain amount of wealth where they could a lot of people say to us, I need help organizing my giving.
Right.
And by that, they usually mean two things. One is back office support, so help
Right.
with the due diligence, getting those checks to the right organizations
Getting
at
the
the
tax
right
ID
time.
numbers back.
Exactly, exactly. So a donor establishes a fund called a donor advised fund at the Community Foundation. They make a gift to the Community Foundation. It's tax deductible at the time that they make it, and then can give advice out of that fund to the foundation about where to grant those funds over any amount of time that they choose to do so.
That's great. That also helps them sort of have a bit of a shield between them and people who may be seeking grants from them and such, so that their focus is on what their points of passion are, and you help manage that and those relationships, which can get complicated.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sure.
We can help facilitate that relationship, and we're then the ones in the business of saying no too,
Yeah.
which is a help to a lot of donors.
Yeah, no, that's
Yeah.
huge. What was it about philanthropy? How do you say it?
Philanthropy.
Philanthropy. What was about philanthropy, giving, that brought you into the fold?
I'm pretty lucky because I've been doing this my whole career for over 20 years. I think I grew up with grandparents that were ministers and missionaries to the Presbyterian Church. My father ran a nonprofit. So I grew up with these examples that being of public service
Right.
was a career path. So I'm sure if I hadn't had that modeled, I might not have thought about it in the same way
You could have been evil. I mean,
on the other side.
and Karin, how about you? What was it about this sort of work that drew you in?
Well, I feel so fortunate because I came to the Community Foundation. My first experience of the Community Foundation was actually as a grantee. So before I had my position there, I applied for grants, I
Oh, wow.
received grants, and so
And now you owe them, and they want the money back, so you're working it off.
So I came
see,
there,
okay,
sort of
yeah.
like the dishwasher.
Right.
No, and so I came with an understanding from the grantee perspective about the challenges of being in relationship with the Community Foundation.
Yeah.
And when I was hired as a program officer for arts and education, and that was my field of expertise. And so I came into the fold bringing my background in a specific area, and grew into. I mean, I had always had a personal desire, and
Well, let's talk about what was the personal desire. What drew you in? I mean, yeah.
towards to the
Were
Community
you an
Foundation.
artist, or were you? I mean,
Yes,
Okay,
a performing artist. So my background in the arts was really what drew me closest to the Community Foundation.
What was
I
your-
applied for a grant through the Arts Council to do a professional development workshop in partnership with the Santa Rosa Symphony. So we
wow.
5-year program where we brought teachers from Sonoma County down to the San Francisco Symphony to learn about integrating the arts into their education programs.
So that's one thing we haven't really touched on. I mean, there's many programs and many things you guys do, but the arts are sort of a big deal in Sonoma County. At least the artists here think that, right? How big are the arts represented? How well are the arts represented in the Community Foundation? I know you have an arts giving program. What does that look like?
Well, we are very dedicated to the arts. The arts are one of our fields of interest. So, health and human services, education, the environment, animal welfare, and the arts.
Right.
So
Right below the animals. That's where it belongs. Yeah.
in no specific order, no specific order. But we really care about the arts, and we have a few different ways that we do that. Our donors, of course, are very giving and support the arts. And then from the program side, we have 2 different competitive grants programs supporting the arts. One in arts education, so it's a yearly competitive grants program where we give out $15,000 grants to organizations, typically arts organizations, that are bringing artists into the schools or bringing students into their arts programs.
And that's a transformative amount of money for a small organization, for
It
sure.
is.
Yeah.
I mean, for example, Simply Strings is a program we've been funding through the Santa Rosa Symphony that works with children at Shepherd Elementary School,
Right.
teaching them to play violin in the
awesome.
model of Elsie Stemma. Great program.
Yeah.
So yeah, we really believe in the power of arts education to transform a child's life, and that's why we support it.
And this is, I'm not picking on you guys, but this always, I'm fascinated by this. Arts is always paired with education because we have to find a way to legitimize giving to the arts, right? Or the spend that we make with arts, right? Arts for art's sake is often sort of like not where funds are directed. What is that? What are we afraid of? Why can't we just fund an artist straight up? Or
We do fund an artist straight up.
you guys do?
We
Yeah.
do.
Okay, awesome. Yeah.
Our other arts program is Small Grants for the Arts,
Yeah.
where we actually, going back to what Beth said, that equity, addressing issues of disparity and inequity in our community are a through line through all our grants programs.
Right.
That's the case in our arts education program, as well as our Small Grants for the Arts. So we know that our community is diverse, and that not everyone in our community has access to the arts or even sees their relationship with the arts. And so our Small Grants program is meant to expand engagement with the arts. So individual artists as in relationship with a nonprofit, because they have to apply through a 501c3, have the opportunity to apply for a small grant to do their project. So, for example, we have right now, we did a grant to Josh Windmiller, who's a well-known artist and a musician in our community, to launch the festival that he launched this summer.
And very great choice. He's a wonderful guy.
Yes, fantastic. Yeah. So but I hear what you're saying. The arts.
I'm just curious because I feel like we always have to justify the arts somehow, and in light of other social issues, we kind of do. Right?
I would say also that many of our donors are called to give to the arts as one, we really think about it as a portfolio of charitable giving.
Fair enough, yeah.
And don't really juxtapose, it's not an either or. So a lot of people would give to a museum or a symphony, and then they also might be giving to education or issues of poverty.
Yeah, no, that's a great distinction to
And I think as well that the education, when you make an investment in young people, we know that those who have had experience playing an instrument when they're young are much more likely to attend the symphony when they're older. So making an investment in young people and their access to the education really has a ripple effect long term in supporting the arts.
Get them hooked, right? The first one's free, and then they'll be contributors to, I'm just kidding.
Get them as contributors, but get them feeling confident to go to the art, to go sit in the theater and participate.
Yeah, because a lot of people are sort of intimidated by that if that's not already in their lives.
Exactly.
And it can be so enriching when it is in your life. So.
Yes.
Well, let's come back to this in a second. I want to ask you guys about what's happening with Creative Sonoma and all that. So we'll be right back. We're talking with the doyens of the Community Foundation. So.
Everybody has a dream. Mine was to see the ocean. And with a little help, I made it.
We're with Elizabeth Brown, the president and CEO of the Community Foundation, as well as Karin Demarest, the vice president of programs for the Community Foundation. We were talking a little bit about arts funding and stuff like that, which is, of course, only a small percentage, ultimately, of what part of the portfolio of things you guys do. But I wanted to ask real quick about Creative Sonoma, which is the new program the county has launched that's being led by Kristen Madsen, who we've had on the show before. So are you guys working together? Or?
Yes, part of what we do is our grant making, which we just described in the arts, a couple of our grants programs, but another contribution that we make to the community is our work beyond grant making. So we do participate in many county initiatives that from the think tank perspective, and making relationships. So when Kristen came to Sonoma County, we were right there with her, introducing her to artists, connecting her with the community, and continued to act in a kind of advisory role and support role for the launch.
And that's a big thing you guys do. You don't just cut checks. You help organizations and individuals within those organizations create a vision for their own programs and how they can better manage themselves.
I think even broader than that, we participate in partnerships where we're creating a vision for the whole county in a long-term way. And this is something that I feel like Sonoma County does an especially incredible job at working together. I've had the honor of working in philanthropy in a lot of different areas of the Bay Area, in Atlanta, Georgia, and Washington, D.C., and there is something really special about the way we approach problems here, with a lack of competition and an idea that you don't have to have organizational ownership of an issue. And in fact, you can't. We all have to work together. Public, private sector.
What is it? Something in the water? Something about our culture here? The fact that we're sandwiched between Marin and Mendocino. I mean, what differentiates us and creates that community?
I've thought about it a lot because my previous job was just in Marin, but this is a culture that's not just a few miles north of Marin County.
Well, there's less cocaine. I'm sorry, I said that out loud. Yeah, but there's less. It's a different culture.
It's a different culture.
Yeah.
I think something about the emphasis on our land and agriculture and just this connection of our resources in a more raw way, in a sense.
Somehow it seems like we're better integrated than a lot of counties, or like you're saying, we have a real investment in our place. Whereas I think, not to diss Marin any further than I have, they're about commuting to San Francisco, or they sort of tip their hat a little more to our major metropolitan city. Where Sonoma County is sort of more insular, it seems.
There's a fierce loyalty to Sonoma County by those who live here, and I would say, and this is both a plus and a minus, but there's also a fierce loyalty to the place in Sonoma County you live.
Right.
So people consider themselves, a resident of the town of Sonoma, or Healdsburg, or Sebastopol, or Santa Rosa. And one of the great privileges of sitting at kind of a county level is our ability to make connections across those geographies within our county.
With the different cities. Yeah, I do that too. I have a little chessboard, and I look over and I think how I can manipulate and maneuver. Yeah, we're going to take out Runner Park. Yeah. It's gone. I mean, do you guys work with like individual cities, the municipalities themselves, like Santa Rosa, or I mean, how does that work when you're envisioning a broader, when you're envisioning something for the county? When do you dive in and start working on the street level with the individual city?
Well, I think it's represented in our work in collective impact. So there are many countywide initiatives that are taking the municipalities and partnering them with nonprofits and business. And a couple of examples would include Health Action. Beth sits on the Health Action Council, and there's 40 or so members of that council, from city council members to nonprofits, faith-based organizations. And that body has an overarching goal of supporting Sonoma County to be the healthiest county by 2020.
Of course, right.
And so they have many initiatives around health, education, and economic wellness. And within the context of those three buckets, there are specific outcomes that we're all working towards. So that's one of the ways that we do that.
That's
work.
fascinating. I didn't realize you guys were, I should have figured, but you guys are that well organized, where you're on each other's boards or in each other's councils and that kind of thing. And that's,
and our partnership with the county is tremendous.
Yeah, the county seems to really have been electrified lately, where they're really trying to dive in and make and manifest real change real fast.
Well, I think that's part of an answer to the question why Sonoma County is so collaborative. I think we have a public sector that is very engaged, that's on the ground, that really looks at the issues, is dedicated to collaboration and partnership in a genuine way. And that is really kind of creating the container for all of us, the support. I mean, they represent as a backbone to our Cradle to Career initiative. So Cradle to Career is an opportunity for cross-sector engagement in supporting our young people from the time they're born to the time they enter the workforce. So the County Department of Health Services acts as the backbone to implement that, and then all the partners come together to make that happen.
So
And excuse me. I mean, being in private philanthropy, we're really in the leveraging business. So we can't fund any one issue or even any part of one issue. So we have to look at who is the largest grant maker. Well, government is always the largest grant maker. So where we can make a difference in places where maybe the government can't fund, or we can be a spokesperson or advocate for those policy changes.
That's great. And I noticed kids have come up quite a bit, and obviously kids are the future. Am I correct in assuming that you're making a big investment in reaching young people now, not just, of course, to get them addicted to the arts, but to really get them launched?
Ready. Yes, absolutely. We're in year 2 of our early childhood education initiative.
Oh, it's real. It's okay.
It's a real deal. That's a good question.
Right.
Because you may see the I Read posters on the back of Sonoma County transit buses.
Yeah, it's huge everywhere. Yeah.
So that's part of our contribution to the Collective Impact Initiative Cradle to Career. So we are working with a team to launch a family literacy program, because we know that when children are read to daily, it's one of the greatest things that a parent can do to support their child being ready to enter kindergarten, ready to succeed. And so that's the first goal of Cradle to Career, is as a community, we want every child to step into kindergarten and be ready to learn. And reading to kids is one of the ways that we can do that. So we've launched the public awareness campaign, I Read, and we're doing a lot to support family literacy.
That's great. So, I mean, basically, the investments you're making now is going to manifest. When are we going to see it? 5, 10, 15, 20 years? When does Sonoma County become Xanadu, right? I mean, that's what's going to happen, right? I mean,
Well, we hope that
Right.
every child will be able to. We don't see an achievement gap. We
Right.
see an opportunity gap, and we know that some young people need more in order to have the same. And so, by this investment, we're really hoping, and it's not just reading to children. There's many different strategies. Universal preschool. Our Board of Supervisors just made a significant investment in preschool. So there's many different avenues that we're approaching this. But yes, I hope in time that we will see the third grade literacy rates increase, which is a big indicator of success down the line, including high school graduation. At the other end of Cradle to Career, we have career technical education and support for young people to get into the careers that they are best suited for. So I think we will start to see the impact of this right away because young people will be engaged, but eventually, long term as well.
And we also support the college access end of that age spectrum through our scholarship partner, 10,000 Degrees Sonoma County.
We're going to have you guys back on and dive into this. This is great stuff, and thanks for being good sports. I really appreciate it. We're with Elizabeth Brown, President and CEO of the Community Foundation, and Karin Demarest, the Vice President of Programs for the Community Foundation. Thanks again. It was
Thank
great.
you.
We'll
Thank you.
seriously have you back on. It's a lot of good stuff.
We
to
would
talk
love
about.
Thank
that.
you.
Yeah. Hey, so if you guys dig 707, you'll dig our sister show, The Council. And what's apropos here is they spoke to 3 organizations that were beneficiaries of the Community Foundation. Those were Santa Rosa Symphony, Simply Strings, Voices for Youth, and Compassion Without Borders. I encourage you heartily to check those out at youtube.com/CMedia Labs and continue watching.